I'm ChosenArchitect, and this is All the Mods 9 to the Sky. So jumping back into some more All the Mods 9 to the Sky and jumping back into our beautiful world, I have a plan for today, and it is one of my favorite parts of any series, and that's the part where we start to explode chickens. Oh yes, for mob farms, and that means today we're diving into mob grinding utils. So yes, you heard me right, no chicken is safe on my island. Yeah, including that one right there. So some things I have to think about when setting up mob farms. We, one, need to make sure that we have all the resources available to us to even do it in the first place, especially with the mob grinding utils. Next, I need a space to place it in, and I think these tubes are going to be a perfect spot for that. And then I need to worry about lighting conditions. And then finally, figuring out the logistics of sorting through all of the mob dropped items and making sure that we never have a case of item overflow. Now, something to mention, there are many different ways that you could farm mobs technically in this pack outside of mob grinding utils. One, you can do a traditional vanilla spawner. If you absolutely wanted to build one in the sky, it would work perfectly in this. However, that would not be something that's super easy to automate, as you would have to stand there constantly. Next would probably be a Drigme farm from Ars Nouveau, probably one of the coolest in my opinion, and very, very cheap way of setting up a mob farm. And then finally, we of course have mob grinding utils, which in my opinion is one of the most overpowered ways of making a mob farm. And today, that's the one I'm going to show you how to set up. Now, getting that farm set up is not the easiest task in the world because your first initial task is to get XP. So within mob grinding utils, it looks very plain and looks like it just works on regular spawners, but the cursed earth or the dreadful dirt and the delightful dirt, they basically spawn mobs. So delightful dirt will spawn passive mobs like your cows and chickens, and your dreadful dirt will spawn hostile mobs. Now, getting that dirt is the part that's a little bit confusing at first, because to actually get it, we're going to need XP. And if you remember a couple of episodes ago, we made the experience crystal. Now, if you don't remember how to make the experience crystal, let me show you. So if we take a dive into the experience crystal, we'll see that it requires a bottle of enchanting, and that's the thing you have to overcome. And the way that I did it was I just used a force rod, and you can go ahead and make the cheap force crystal recipe, and force crystals are things that we actually get from our sifting setup. And then I just combined that with any enchanted book and was able to get my bottle of enchanting. And now that we have the experience crystal, we can basically pull out experience after we've dumped our internal experience into it. And pulling out these buckets is what's going to make this process very simple. And that's because to be able to make the dreadful dirt and the delightful dirt, you're going to need to use a couple of different types of chicken feed in order to make these eggs. And these eggs, aka the rotten egg and the golden egg, are the ones that will actually generate this dirt in a 5x5 area of regular dirt. Now, with that being said, we have a couple of different types of things that we need to gather. We need a few basic mob drops. So I'm sure you've killed some mobs at some point, and these are what we're going to need. But the main thing that makes this a little bit harder to get is you do need the experience buckets. And so now that we have that overcome, this is going to be a pretty easy thing to craft. Now I have it planned out. I think I want my hostile mob farm to be inside this tube. And that means I'm limited to a 3x3 area instead of a 5x5 area. But we could actually use Silk Touch, and what we can do is make a 5x5 area, and I could just have an extended mob farm that goes a little bit deeper into this area. I think that will be fantastic, and it's not going to be any harder than any other setup. So like I said, plan hostile mob farm over here, and then inside my other tube, we can set up a passive mob farm. And both of these farms will be incredibly powerful and will work independently of each other. So now after making these feeds, I need to sneak up on an unsuspecting chicken. This one being perfect. And right click the bag of feed onto it. Come here. It explodes into a rotten egg. And I need to do the same thing for the golden egg. So I need to lure out another unsuspecting victim. I just have to find another chicken. If not, I do have a couple of chickens laying around inside my inventory. Get it? They're just laying around. Okay, I'll see my way out. Just like this guy. And voila. Yes, nothing like the sounds of Happy Birthday, Darko. So good. I love it every time. But now that we have both of these eggs, I think it might be a good idea to grab a platform of dirt. So let's grab some dirt and do this by hand. I think this is going to be definitely worth doing. And we can utilize our spell book here to silk touch. So I can set this to extract, and this will allow me to actually pick this dirt back up. So if you don't have a silk touch pick, the easiest method to get silk touch is probably by using the R spell book. You just need to make sure you're on a tier 2 spell, and then you just need simply 1 emerald and you get silk touch. Now for the hostile mobs, you're going to want to make sure it is daytime or you have lights nearby. You don't want to spawn this inside of your base and it being dark because, well, these mobs will start spawning and probably overwhelm you. But we can do it in the daylight, and I just want to quickly go ahead and start to collect this with our silk touch. That way I can hand place it inside of this area. And now I know it says that it will catch fire if exposed to sunlight, but I think because of my base being claimed, it's not catching fire. And the same thing goes for the golden egg. However, mobs are going to most definitely start spawning immediately. And there's going to be all kinds of stuff, all the way from Ars Nouveau mobs to standard overworld mobs. Yeah, I'm going to try my best to get this cleaned up as quick as possible. Now, along with all of the dirt, I also kind of want to get an idea of how far this is going to lead out, and also how I'm going to start pushing these mobs into certain positions. And this is where a mob fan is going to come into play. This thing is so nice. We can, for one, see the actual area that it is going to push entities. And I have it now set up to cover a 3x3 area. And it's long enough with enough upgrades to cover this. By default, it only covers, I believe, 5 blocks. And so I had to add 4 upgrades to cover 9 blocks in length. Because I want to have a glass window right here that is going to, for one, block light, but is also going to prevent these mobs from escaping. And then, of course, the ultimate goal is to have our mob crusher or killer essentially right here. And so I do want to have a way to send these mobs here. And then also I have to worry about flying mobs with some of them. So I have another fan set up at top, and I want to make sure that this pushes and keeps the mobs down on the ground. This is going to be especially essential whenever we farm up these little guys. Yeah, because they like to fly all over the place. And then for the ultimate surprise, I'm going to make sure that I have vector plates right here, which are from Dark Utilities, which essentially push the mobs over. They push them in the direction, and also items. They get pushed all in this direction, which is going to lead it into the thing that is going to kill these mobs, and that is going to be the mob crusher. Well, I guess it is a mob crusher, but technically it's called a mob masher. And this bad boy is one gnarly looking machine when it's up and running, and something that you 100% don't want to get yourself caught up in. You definitely don't want to be turned into meat spaghetti. Now, there have been some changes also to one of my favorite glasses that have ever existed in modded Minecraft. And that glass is tinted glass. I've been a super fan of this stuff forever. It has a connected texture. It is nice and dark looking, and I really love it. But in this pack, the recipe has been changed and does require mechanism coal dust and obsidian. However, you don't have to use mechanism if you already have a mechanical squeezer set up. And that's exactly what I'm working on here. I am basically crushing down with a mechanical squeezer, some coal dust, and some obsidian dust. And that should be plenty for now. And something to keep in mind, this glass can be used to take down the wither. Yes, it is wither resistant. Now, before we start to place dirt in, let's talk about the logistics of how this is all going to work. Now, I don't want to get anything started to spawn because we're going to have a ton of items to deal with if we don't get this under control first. So let's talk about how I want to set up the item logistics. Now, I don't want to cover this up and make this look ugly. So instead, what I want to do is I'm going to use a few of these items you see here. An absorption hopper allows me to collect the drops and the experience from within an area that is actually defined by us. So if we go ahead and click this and hit show, we can now see that this actually has a collection area, and we can move this around by changing the offsets. And so I need to bring the offsets back just like we see there. And that is actually just enough, I think, to cover this block here. And then we need to bring it up a few to kind of bring it up off the ground. We don't need this to be that low. And this area seems to be plenty to cover what we need. So that gives me this area out here to play with things instead of needing to figure out how I'm going to hide them for right now. But later on, this definitely might get changed and will probably get hidden underneath once we have a storage system. Now, to set up the item logistics for this right here, we should be able to hopefully pull that experience out and send excess experience into an experience crystal. Of course, that would be the ultimate goal. And that we might be able to use the fluid cards in order to do that. I'm going to have to give this a little bit of test here, and we're going to find out if that's the case. If not, there's another way we can go about it. But for now, let's go ahead and place down our laser IO node. So essentially what we're going to need is an inventory to send items to, so we can send them into this barrel right here. And then we're also going to want a place for overflow. So this is where last episode we talked a little bit about laser IO and priorities, and this is where these are going to really start to shine. So for right now, we can open this up, and I have my cards over here, my input and output cards, and we have some for fluid and some for items. So right off the bat, let's go ahead and get the item one set up. So this is connected to the absorption hopper, and what we're going to need is an item card that is essentially set up in here that is going to be pulling, and it's going to be extracting items. I'm going to go ahead and set this to the max transfer rate that we can do without upgrades for right now, but we're probably going to need upgrades later. So that's in there, and that's pulling items, but we got to give it somewhere to go. And that's where we're going to need a couple of insert cards. And so underneath the barrel, let's go ahead and set this up first. And this insert card, we actually want this to have a higher priority than our next insert card. And that is so it will try to send the items in here, but if this barrel is full, that's when it will send to the other priorities or the lower priorities. And that is where I want another item card to go over here. And so essentially now we have items that will get pulled out of here. They'll be sent into our barrel. And if this barrel is full, we will prevent items from overflowing in the world by going into this trash can. Now this barrel just isn't any normal barrel, because in this barrel, we can actually place in these advanced void upgrades. And this is where things get very powerful, because we can switch this mode into tags. And this allows us to tag certain items. For example, I can put a sword in here and I can scroll through the list of tags and notice there's a forge swords and there's a forge tools. If we were to add forge tools, that means any tool that is generated inside here from a mob drop will be instantly voided. And you can do this for most items, basically giving you an unlimited filter. Now with this, you just got to be very careful, because you don't want to walk by here and accidentally toss your sword into the absorption hopper. That would be unfortunate, but I think we'll be fine for now. Now for fluids, it also works exactly the same. Over here, we have our absorption hopper, and we want to pull out of here with fluids. So we want to make sure our fluid card is set to extract as well. And right here, it's currently set to 1 bucket every 20 ticks, and that's perfectly fine. But later on, we could upgrade this if that is not enough. Now I do want to access this side, and this is just going to be connected to our experience. And over here, we want to make sure this is just sending that fluid over. So I don't have a great way of testing this yet unless I store a couple of levels. So store levels, and does it actually pull? Oh wait, that's the wrong thing, right? Because we would actually need the experience in here. So yeah, I'm gonna have to test this once we get it up and running and actually starts receiving experience in here. But now this little logistical setup down here should automate the filtering and sorting of items inside of our system. And this little failsafe right here is probably one of the most important parts, because you just don't want items overflowing into the world, because that could lead to tons of problems, not only on servers, but it could also cause terrible lag where you can't even join your world on single player worlds. And now to be able to match all of our other color stuff, I went ahead and set my colors to max red, green, and turn my alpha all the way up. That way we now have ourselves an orange laser IO node. So now that I have this over here, I'm going to repeat the same process over on this mob farm. Now something I noticed for that glass that I was wanting to make, the tinted glass, it does require the hardened version from thermal, and you can get away with making this without getting into any of the machines by using fire charges. So yes, I'm going to need a couple of these bad boys right here in order to make enough of this tinted glass, at least for the hostile mob farm. And so this should be enough tinted glass for at least our hostile mob farm, because we only need 9 to fill up this space. And then I wanted to use the clear stained white glass for the regular passive mobs. Ooh, this is going to look really nice. So at this point, I am almost ready to go. So there's still a few things left to do. Like one, I probably want to have down here a lever so I can turn the mob masher on and off. And then I want to start replacing this out. And then I also, up on this level right here, I'm going to cap this off with some orange concrete before everything turns on. Now, because I have feral flare lanterns under my base, those are also going to have to be removed after I start to add in the dirt. Nothing's going to spawn right now because it is actually bright in here. And these tunnels work perfect, by the way, for this mob farm, as I ended up with literally just 1 dirt left over. Now, another thing to note about the passive dirt, or the delightful dirt, Well, it does grow grass, so we are going to have to figure out a solution to getting rid of that grass. And believe it or not, I have a very clever solution for this. Now, some will say, Chosen, use vector plates, as this right here will allow them to spawn on there. But this is just to disprove that theory. They do not actually spawn if the vector plates are on top of that dirt. Now, for me to be able to automate this, I simply just like to use an automated regular dispenser. And I want to place it on the inside here. That way our redstone doesn't conflict with the mob fan. And this also allows me to be a little bit more compact with how I set up my redstone. And for this, I want to utilize a sequencer and a timer. And the way I like to do this is by leaving this or setting this to 60 on a timer that is going into a sequencer, and then inside the sequencer, just leaving it by default, I like to check the first box, and then on the fourth row, 4 over, check this box. And this gives you just the right amount of timing to allow the water to dispel out, and then also leaving just enough time for mobs to spawn before anything else appears. And this is where things get serious, because as soon as I turn this on, these mobs are going to start, well, processing. And this is where I need to turn off my magnet while I'm over here. And this is where I'm also going to probably want to use a magnetizer or a demagnetizer. Now, I also want to get this turned on to make sure these mobs get pushed to the ground and make sure everything is destroyed here. And there we go. We can now see that all of our mob drops are getting placed in here. Now, to be able to get my hostile mob farm up, I'm going to need to remove a bunch of these feral flare lanterns. The range on these just are too far, and even if you were to break a few of these and you were to technically remove the light, it would still end up relighting this over time, which is very unfortunate. But as you can see, with this on, all of our hostile mobs have now spawned. Now, ultimately, the goal is to be able to remove all of my feral flare lanterns from the base and just go with very specific and deliberately placed lights and light sources. And whenever I do that, this mega torch is going to become amazing, because what this does is prevents hostile mob spawns from the actual base. And then this one, the dread lamp, prevents passive mobs from spawning in the base. And it actually does not affect this dirt, so it only affects things on these regular grass. But now, with all of that being said, I guess it's now time to activate our hostile mob farm. And so for this, I need to turn on my fans and get them up and running. And there is still one more thing I need to do before I turn this on and have it start chomping away. I don't want Endermen teleporting all over the base. So what we can use is an Ender inhibitor. And this is going to be amazing because without the Ender inhibitor, well, all of these Endermen would just teleport around the base, and that would be very frustrating. So without further ado, let's turn this bad boy on. And yet again, turn off our mobs. And Endermen are still teleporting out of here, even though they shouldn't technically teleport out. But they did. Hopefully that won't continue. Now, right away, something you probably want to handle is your quivers. And these can just be filtered like this. And we probably want to set this to trinket, leg, quiver. That is just one thing that we can use to technically void these quivers off. Now, it seems like Forcecraft Endermen are the ones that are technically escaping, and then we also have the occasional slime that can escape out, because a slime can spawn on the outer edge of these blocks, thus getting sort of suffocated in the wall, and then they will end up popping out here. The slimes I can't do too much about right now, but the Endermen I might be able to figure out. For one, they were actually popping out of this small space. You can see right here. And so by placing trapdoors up there, I have essentially trapped them in here. But if I was able to kill them much faster, that would definitely solve the problem as well. And that's where we can get into mob mashing upgrades. But first, we're going to have to solve a little bit of a sound problem. And to do that, I want to stand within my mob farm here. And when I do this, I can open up this menu. And now these buttons at the top actually have a really cool use. We can click them, and then we can define and set an anchor point that is going to lock under this channel a very specific sound filter. And so I can then go into it and edit my anchor, and I can change the sound. For example, I can say, hey, within 8 blocks, mute the sounds here. And so we can go into all of these that say hurt. And what we can do is we can start to slowly but surely remove all of them. And same goes for all of the death sounds as well. And that will make this much, much more bearable. So you can hear, we don't actually hear those noises while we're here. But if I was to kill an Enderman over here, we would actually hear it. And I'm definitely going to do the same thing to this side, except I'm going to put it on a different channel. and make sure to edit this anchor down to 8. And you can rename it to like hostile mob farm and passive mob farm. Now let's get back to how we can actually make sure those Endermen don't teleport away by making sure we take them out faster. And to do that, we can actually upgrade that mob masher, and we can go ahead and use sharpness upgrades to make sure we get rid of them very quickly. So after crafting 10 of those, that is the max amount of upgrades that we can put inside of each slot. And there's a lot of different upgrades we can put in here. We can put in all kinds of looting. However, looting's kind of expensive as it does require an enchanted book in this particular mod pack. But there's all kinds of other ones. For example, if you wanted to kill other mobs quicker, you could put smite. For example, zombies and skeletons. There's also one for the arthropods, so if you wanted to kill spiders quicker. And there's even one for beheading if you wanted to get more heads, which is really, really good for wither skeletons. So now these mobs should be ending very quick, as soon as they touch this, almost just completely being annihilated. So now after all of that, we can start to work on more item logistics stuff. And already this barrel is completely filled, and already this trash can is being utilized. You can see by the items being sent over here, or the visualization of the items being sent. And this is surprisingly keeping up with all of this, even though I didn't necessarily think that it would. But it 100% seems to be handling these items just fine. Now, one of the big problems that I'm seeing, unfortunately, are these ability totems. And I'm going to have to kind of go through here and check on these ability totems as we go. As a lot of these ability totems we don't really want, but I did notice there is one ability totem in here that is absolutely insane. And that is the flight ability totem. I'm definitely going to take that one out for right now. And check this out. We also have the Wither one. There's a lot of stuff that you get from this, and it's just kind of ridiculous. Now, I think for the time being, I'm just going to void off the ability totems, and I believe this should just match the item type, and at this point should start voiding all of these ability totems off. And the same goes for my hostile mob farm. For this one, I'm probably going to have to add a separate void upgrade because I can't, this is one of the few things that you can't actually void here. So I think at this point, it's almost ready to go. The only thing I would say left to do is to add some stack upgrades inside of this barrel, allowing us to store multiple items per slot. So up to like 4,000 or even more, depending on how many we put in there. But something I also wanted to mention is this is actually working. So yeah, I'm happy to see this because not in every pack does stuff like this just work. And so we are building experience on both sides. I still, though, don't know what to do about the slimes popping out the side. Oh, now this is going to be so nice adding these upgrades into here. This is going to allow this to stack all of that. I just hit the middle mouse button to stack this, and this will hold 16,000 of these items now per slot. You just got to love sophisticated storage. It's just beautiful. This has honestly changed how mob farms work for me. It really has. Same thing is going to go for this. 2 upgrades, and then I can now stack these. So after a bit of time has passed, I've kind of checked to make sure everything was flowing, and I think I even found a solution for the slimes escaping. So all I ended up doing was basically every 3 blocks, I placed down a trap door here on the side, and it seems like not only does that look good, but it also is preventing those slimes from popping out of there. If anything, they should hopefully just die by suffocation in the walls, but for right now, this is working out just great. And even over here, this is fantastic. So we have all of our items that are generating on this. Tons of these things have EMC values, so they could definitely be utilized later on. And I just let it run for right now. This is infinite wool. We have pretty much just generating nonstop. And then over here, we're going to have infinite ender pearls and all kinds of other useful things. So now at the end of the day, we're also generating XP, and this thing is fantastic and leads us into what we're going to be working on next, which is going to be our storage system. And that's right, we are going to be diving, hopefully next episode, into applied energistics. And then we can start to expand our base exponentially. And as some would say, turn this entire series into an applied energistics tutorial. Cough, cough, that's not what I do. But there's still one more thing that we need to do, and that is to take a look back at that ability bottle, because if you remember, we ended up getting the flight. And this has got to be one of the most powerful ability bottles that you can get, and we got it out of our first round. I mean, no telling how many mobs it took to take this out, but we ended up getting it in that chest, and this was probably one of the only ability bottles that I absolutely wanted outside of like speed. And so we should be able to open this up, and I think I can right click this, right? And then we can apply it to ourselves, and that's where the ability bottle lets us take it off of us. But we do need, I believe, it does tell us right here, 30 player levels in order to initiate this. And we definitely have 30 levels. So I'm going to right click this, equip it to myself, and then this is where I can put it back into the ability bottle if I ever want to get rid of it. It also gives us our levels back. And so, yeah, don't ever feel like you're trapped with the abilities you have. You should be able to always dump them back over into your ability bottle, or at least should. Don't hold me to that. I mean, if anything, just be careful. Notice, for example, I have speed right here. Each level you get of speed, which I do have several speed inside of here, that is going to increase that level. So I can go in here and with that ability, I can send that over and notice it's going to up this to speed 2. Now it's at speed 3 and at speed 4. And technically if we had speed 5, it shouldn't let us send any more into ourself. Speed 5 is actually really nice. So now let's go ahead and equip that flight. And it says it allows you to fly, or at least it says it allows you to fly. Do I need a little bit more experience? Okay, there we go. And now without our jetpack even equipped, like we don't even need our jetpack anymore, we should be able to just creative fly everywhere because of that ability totem. So definitely get your mob farm set up if flight is what you're wanting, because you can get this ASAP. So now the last thing I definitely need to do that I almost forgot is to place down some demagnetizers. And these are going to help me out tremendously. I'm going to place them right here. And I think that is enough range. They should cover, I believe, a 5x5, they say. Yeah, up to 5 blocks away. So 1, 2, that should cover the mob farm and prevent my magnet from picking these items up. Ooh, it doesn't look like it. Okay, so I'm going to have to take it a little bit closer to the main mob farm. And so how about I place them just right here? That'll be great. That way I can keep my magnet on around the base and I just don't have to worry anymore. And so this should prevent my magnet from picking up these items when I'm nearby, or at least it should. And there we go. I have now successfully set up 2 mob farms, one for passive mobs and one for hostile mobs. We ended up getting creative flight, and I can't tell you how excited I am to move into our storage system. That is going to be phenomenal and allow automation of everything we've done thus far, and will allow us to expand our power infrastructure even more. Oh, I'm so excited. And if you're excited as well and you're looking forward to more episodes, make sure that you are subscribed by checking that subscribe button down below. And if you're not, be sure to click it. And also while you're down there, be sure to give this video a huge thumbs up, as I would really appreciate it, and it helps the YouTube algorithm. Of course, commenting also does as well. And with all of that out of the way, it's now time to thank the amazing supporter of today's episode. And that amazing thanks is going to go out to Starry. Thank you so much for your amazing support by choosing to support me over on the Discord by becoming a Discord premium member and supporting me in one of the best ways possible. Keep in mind, if you are a supporter of any tier, you do get access to world downloads, and by tomorrow's episode, it'll be episode 10, and that means it's World Download Day. So if you're not a supporter already, definitely worth checking it out by going over to the Discord and checking out that over there. So listed down in the description below, you can go to discord.gg/ChosenArchitect and join the amazing crew today. I appreciate it, guys. I'll see you in the next one. And as always, thanks for watching. Bye.